What is going on, y'all? We have a lot to cover today per usual, but I think we can get out some good concepts here and talk about some of the important things to be looking at from a price action perspective and then from a more kind of fundamental perspective. Right now we're looking at Bitcoin, and we can see that we talked about this in the last video, that we had this move up to roughly 60K. We talked about how it was pretty high probability it would get smacked off that level. This was effectively a big short squeeze. You had this giant move down with really no bounce. Open interest, short open interest accumulates. Funding gets really negative down here, and we knew that there was a likelihood that you'd get a pretty big move up to the 60K level, and that's what happened. I think that we have to look at this now very scalpy, a very short term kind of time frame if we're going to talk about anything useful here. On the higher time frame, things still look pretty good. We can see that this weekly close, if you're into candlestick patterns and stuff, that's a pretty nice looking weekly close back up to this 60K level. Now, we also have to mention though that kind of back to this short term time frame, that this can chop around here for quite some time, I think, before we're able to finally conquer this 70K beast here. And we need to talk a little bit about some of the reasons why we're likely to see choppiness in this range for the next few weeks, maybe months, is because of multiple risk vectors. But I think the first one we have to start with, we'll come back to the price action in a moment, is the Israel situation. Is everyone knows about this, but the markets are not going to want to, people are not going to want to be over leveraged during, if this attack actually occurs, especially for crypto, right? But if you think about this from a game theory perspective, everyone knows about this, so people are just waiting to see what happens. To me, this is a way bigger deal for crude oil and some other legacy markets, but this is kind of something that this is something that I think that could kind of keep us pretty choppy here, at least for today, until this gets over with. Who knows if this actually happens today? People have been saying, or Iran and Israel, they've been talking back and forth, and this has it was supposed to happen last week, according to different sources, and we're still here waiting on this imminent attack, whatever that really means. Not a geopolitical expert, but it's definitely a risk vector that I'm paying attention to. But I think the bigger risk vectors is for markets like crypto and like legacy indexes, stocks and stuff, is definitely, let me pull this up here, some of the economic data that we're going to be having over the next week. So if we look here, we have PPI tomorrow. This is going to be 8:30 Eastern Standard Time, and it's hard to say like how the market's going to react to this. Remember, we had this big market sell-off that occurred last week or a week before. We had the bounce last week. And a big part of that deleveraging event, a big part of the reason why people were de-risking is because of the recession fears, because of the data we had a couple weeks ago, remember? And we did have some favorable data that came in last Friday in terms of what the market wanted to see, and that helped the bounce on Friday. But this is definitely a risk vector in the sense that if this comes in, let's say this comes in low, then people will start to, the recession fear conversation, it fires back up. So I don't see this as a big problem from a higher time perspective, unless you get really bad data. But certainly in the short term, this could create some volatility. So in my opinion, it's probably best to wait to see what happens with this data print, and maybe even wait until Wednesday before putting on a bigger swing trade. But you can, there's going to be lots of scalping opportunities as these data prints come in, specifically if we get a dump, because I think that it's going to be easier to trade to the upside, even though the markets might be heavy and sit, and chop around this range. I think people understand that it's just a matter of time as we get closer to the election, probably after the election, that the conditions for higher prices are going to be likely. So short-term trading opportunities here. We'll see how that data comes in before trying to speculate on what that means. You also do have some data coming in later in the week, but these are the two big ones this week. So PPI and then CPI. CPI, I think, has sort of taken a back seat to some of the other indicators, some of the other data prints, because we kind of know inflation is coming down. And honestly, if we saw inflation drop too quickly, that might actually, this might be counterintuitive to some people, but I actually don't think the market wants to see that, because you don't want any deflationary fears. That would signal that, oh, we might really be going into a recession, right? So if it comes in as expected or slightly lower, I think the markets will appreciate that. If it comes in significantly higher, that would be a problem. But I, based off of what I've seen, I don't think that's very likely. But always have to be open-minded there. I think we should go back to the price action and talk about, some of these shorter-term opportunities, because volatility, the price action has actually been quite favorable for that over the last couple weeks. And what we're going to do is pull out some of our tools here, go to the daily time frame. And right now you can see that Bitcoin is fighting on this 200-day moving average. This is a pretty critical level. Typically people, especially in the crypto markets, but I would just say markets like the S&P 500 and NASDAQ, people don't want to be buying when you're under that level. Doesn't mean that, for Bitcoin right now, it doesn't mean that it's over because you're under that level. But if you're consistently getting rejected off of that level, not getting acceptance above, that will signal that there is weakness in the market, and you could see further downside. So we really do want to see a daily close above that level. But right now we're just kind of fighting on it, and I think that's perfectly fine. As you can see, we went all the way to the 50-day and 100-day moving averages and got rejected. This is going to be the big level. I think that's going to be tough to get over. Around 63, 64, 62, around this level, okay, this zone. And as you can see in the past, when we've gotten above it, price has accelerated, and when prices get below that level, they tend to accelerate to the downside. As you can see, rejection, downside, breakthrough. So very critical level here. If we were to break this level this week and establish some price action above it, that would be a very bullish signal, but I don't know if I'm expecting that this week. Again, you have these data prints that are coming out, but even after that, you have to think about this from a game theory perspective. Really, how far can these markets really go going into the election, especially Bitcoin, which is now somewhat of a political issue. I don't think it is in the longer term, but in the short term it is. So people are naturally going to want to fade prices as they get, above this level. But if we can just chop around and just, create constructive price action on it, I think that would be great. But I think we're probably going to be chopping around until you get one or two things. So number one, if Kamala Harris were to come out and say, I'm pro-crypto in some way, that would reduce a significant overhang here. And that would change kind of the narrative of, oh, well, if Trump wins, Bitcoin goes up. If he doesn't, maybe it goes down. You would eliminate that. And I think that the markets, that might even be enough where Bitcoin could break the highs. Conversely, if you were to get some sort of economic data or some sort of signal, okay, related to global liquidity, meaning like there's liquidity that's being injected to the markets from China or the Fed or something like that. Obviously, that would be very good for Bitcoin as well, but there is some nuance there because the reasons for why they may do that, could be recessionary fears and stuff like that. So we don't want to see really weak data. We want to get in the sweet spot where the data is just weak enough where that the Fed is likely to come in at some point and start supporting the markets, right? And we can see that ETH is much lower in terms of it's not in its range that Bitcoin is now fighting to get back into, which is at 60K level. That level for ETH is around 3,000, 2,900 roughly. And you can see that this is actually, in my opinion, and probably a better trade here. You can just tell that it clearly has quite a bit of room before it even gets to any of these moving averages that would act as resistance. Now, some people say, well, it's there because it's weak, and I don't really buy that. I think this was sort of, I'm not going to say an anomaly, but you had some pretty interesting things happen to get you here. You had these big trading firms like Jump that were just dumping all the ETH they could as quick as they could, or at least it seemed that way, all while you had this, right before and during this this yen carry trade situation that we had last week or 2 weeks ago, right? And the recession fears, right, all together. So you got this big deleveraging event. I sort of see this as the sellers have already sold, and if anybody's interested in ETH, they're likely to buy it at these levels. I think this is actually a pretty solid level here, from 2,300 to where it is now. Solana, on the other hand, this one to me is a lot trickier. It's in this very weird place where it's hard to justify how it's going to break to the upside without some sort of narrative. But it still looks fairly constructive. It had a really big move off the lows. I don't think I'm not that interested in this here. If it were to come back down to 130 or something like that, or were to show some constructive price action around where it is now, maybe I would. But I think I'm more interested in ETH and Bitcoin here. That's just personal preference. I'm sure some people would disagree there. And altcoins, I'm not really interested in those right now. I think there are some good opportunities, and you can see that Pepe and all these things, they're moving around a lot more. But to me, I just don't think it's seasonally right for these very high risk plays. I think that will be later this year in Q4. So I'm not going to really focus too much on there. We do talk about these things in the Discord, and if you want to join us there, we can answer questions and show some analysis on some of these things. But for the most part, we want to focus on Bitcoin. So kind of in recap here, we really want to see what these data prints do. We want to see, can we show some constructive price action around this 200-day moving average that could send us back and retest this important 63K level roughly, and just kind of go from there, right? Like this might be, let's say we get back to this level and we're seeing weakness, that might indicate a good short trade there. And conversely, if we start to show some constructive price actions, let's say we get a dip because of some data or FUD from the Israeli-Iran situation, and it gets bought back up real quickly, that would probably be a good long. Not financial advice, obviously. That's just how I see it. So that's really it, guys. I think it could be, it could be sort of a not a lot going on in terms of big narratives for crypto right now. We had that a few months ago, leading up to the Trump event at Bitcoin Nashville, and now things might start to slow down a bit, unless we start to get some sort of catalyst to really move things around. All right, guys, I think that's all we're going to cover today. And until next time, happy hunting, friends.
Hey, thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel if you'd like more updates like this, and let us know in the comments, what do you think about today's video and DeFiancy update and insight? Also, make sure that you join our Discord, our feed community chat, where we discuss things like this, what's going on in real time. Typically, our Discord community is the first to know what's happening, and we would love to see you there. Check the link in the description. And until then, we'll see you in the next DeFiancy Insight video. Bye for now.